The tide was going out. Amelia Kessler stood at the edge of the stone wharf with salt wind pulling at her flaxen gold hair and nothing in her pockets but a copper coin and a folded map of a coastline she would never reach. The merchant vessel she'd booked passage on 3 weeks ago, the one Malcolm had sworn he'd pay for, the one Malcolm had promised was their fresh start, was already pulling away from the dock, its gangplank hauled up, its crew shouting orders she couldn't hear over the crash of the harbor waves. He'd taken her savings, all of it. Every coin she'd earned selling hand-drawn maps at the trade markets along the southern corridor. He'd taken the leather purse from under the mattress while she was settling their account at the inn, and he'd walked onto that ship without her. And now the vessel was catching wind in its sails, and the harbor was emptying, and she was standing on a dock in a port town where she knew no one, owned nothing, and had nowhere to go. The copper coin was warm in her fist. Enough for a cup of broth. Not enough for passage. Not enough for a room. Not enough for anything that resembled a plan. 2 years. She'd spent 2 years with Malcolm Cray, following him from town to town because he'd said he knew where the work was. Because every time she'd thought about leaving, he'd looked at her with those washed-out blue eyes and said, "Where would you even go, Amelia?" Like the question was an answer. Like her silence proved she belonged to him. The merchant vessel was rounding the breakwater now. She watched it go and waited for the panic to come. It didn't. What came instead was a stillness so absolute it frightened her. The numb, flat clarity of a woman who had finally hit the bottom. She was alone. She was stranded. She was free. The harbor was busy despite the early hour. Porters hauled cargo, gulls screamed overhead, and fishing boats lined the inner docks with their catches laid out in ice-packed crates. Amelia pressed her back against a mooring post and tried to think. She could sell her satchel. The canvas was good quality, and there were 3 finished maps inside. Hand-inked coastal charts she'd drawn herself. She could get maybe 8 coins for the lot. Enough for a room and 2 meals. Enough to buy herself 1 day to figure out the next one. She was reaching for the satchel strap when the shadow fell across the dock. It wasn't the shadow of a fishing boat. It was too large for that. Too heavy. Too deliberate. The kind of shadow that belonged to a vessel built for distance, not for netting mackerel in the shallows. She looked up. The ship was enormous. 3-masted, dark-hulled, with sails the color of deep charcoal trimmed in bronze. It cut through the harbor entrance like a blade through still water, and the dock shuddered beneath her boots as it eased into the berth directly in front of her. No shouting from the crew, no wasted motion, just the creak of rope and the groan of timber and the heavy splash of the anchor dropping into the harbor floor. The gangplank came down, and the man who walked to the top of it stopped the breath in her chest. He was tall, broad through the shoulders in a way that spoke of labor, not just breeding, and he wore a midnight navy wool coat that hung open over an ivory linen shirt unlaced at the throat. His hair was iron black, cropped close at the sides with the longer top wind-swept back from his face, and his jaw was set in a way that suggested he'd been clenching it for the entire approach. A bronze compass pendant glinted at his collar. His boots were tall, leather, sea-worn, and they made no sound as he descended the gangplank with the kind of authority that didn't need announcing. But it was his eyes that caught her. Deep iron, dark as the anchor chain coiled at the bow of his ship, and fixed, entirely, unmistakably, on her. The world tilted. Not metaphorically. The dock beneath her boots, which had been rocking gently with the harbor swell, went still. Completely, impossibly still. The wind that had been tugging at her hair settled. The gulls overhead went quiet. Even the crash of waves against the stone breakwater seemed to soften, as though the sea itself had taken a breath and held it. She grabbed the mooring post, steadied herself against the sudden absence of motion. "You," the man said. His voice was low, rough-edged, like salt had gotten into it and stayed. He was standing at the base of the gangplank now, 10 feet from her, and his iron eyes hadn't blinked. "You're the one standing here like the dock owes you something." "It might," she said, because her mouth had apparently decided to keep working even though her brain had stalled. "I've been standing on it long enough." Something shifted in his expression. Not a smile. Not quite. A crack in the granite, maybe. A fault line that suggested warmth somewhere beneath all that stone. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Does it matter?" "It does, if you want to get there." She looked at the ship behind him, at the dark sails and the bronze fittings and the crew that had stopped what they were doing to watch their captain talk to a woman on the dock who clearly had no business being there. She looked at her own hands, ink-stained, calloused, empty. "North," she said. "Thornwick. There's a cartographer's guild that buys coastal maps." "Thornwick is 3 days by sea." He studied her. Not her body. Her situation. The satchel over her shoulder. The boots that had seen too many miles. The way she held herself like a woman who'd been holding herself up alone for a very long time. "You don't have passage." It wasn't a question. "I don't have anything," she said, and she hated that her voice cracked on the last word. She pressed her lips together, lifted her chin. "I had passage. On the vessel that just left. My—" She stopped, swallowed. "Someone took my coin and boarded without me." The man's jaw tightened. She watched the muscle flex beneath his skin, watched his hands curl at his sides, and something about the controlled precision of that anger made her pulse stutter. "Get on," he said. She stared at him. "Get on," he repeated. He didn't step closer, didn't reach for her, just stood at the base of his gangplank with the sea behind him and that iron-dark gaze locked on hers. "Don't look back. I don't know who you are." "Gareth Strand." He said it like it should mean something. When her expression didn't change, something else cracked in his face. Surprise, maybe, or relief. "I'm headed north past Thornwick. You'll have a cabin, meals, and safe passage. No cost. Nothing is free. This is." Pauses. "I don't take payment from people who've been robbed." The word hit her like a stone in the chest. Robbed. Not abandoned. Not left behind. Not any of the softer words she'd been using to avoid the sharp one. Robbed. Because that's what Malcolm had done. He'd robbed her. She looked at the harbor behind her, the empty dock, the town she didn't know, the copper coin still pressed into her palm, warm and useless and small. Then she looked at the gangplank, at Gareth Strand and his iron eyes and his open coat, and the way the dock had gone still the moment he'd stepped onto it. She walked toward him. One step, then another. Then she was passing him on the gangplank, close enough to catch the scent of salt and wood smoke and something deeper, something warm, and the world steadied further with every step she took toward his ship. Like the rocking she'd been feeling her whole life wasn't the sea at all, like it was everything else. He fell into step behind her. She heard his boots on the planks, heard him say something to a crew member in a voice too low to catch, heard the gangplank creak as it was hauled up behind them. She didn't look back. The cabin was small but clean, a narrow bunk with a wool blanket the color of storm clouds, a writing desk bolted to the wall, a porthole that let in a disk of pale morning light. When she sat on the bunk and pressed her hands to the mattress, she realized she was shaking. Not with fear, with the aftermath of it. The delayed understanding that she had just boarded a stranger's ship with nothing but a copper coin and 3 maps, and the stubborn refusal to wait for someone to tell her what to do next. A knock at the door, firm but not aggressive. She opened it. Gareth stood in the narrow corridor with a bowl of stew and a heel of dark bread balanced on a wooden tray. He held it out without ceremony. "Galley doesn't open for another hour," he said. "But you look like you haven't eaten since yesterday." She hadn't. She took the tray, Their fingers brushed over the rim of the bowl and the world lurched. Not the ship, not the sea, but something inside her. A settling, like a compass needle finding north. The stew sloshed and she gripped the tray harder and Gareth's hand tightened over hers, steadying it, steadying her. And for 2 full heartbeats they stood in the doorway of a tiny cabin on a ship she didn't know, connected by a wooden tray and a silence that felt like the deepest breath she'd ever taken. He let go first, stepped back. The settling faded slightly, like a tone dampened, but not silenced. "We dock at Greyport in 2 days for supplies," he said. His voice was rougher than before. "Thornwick is a half-day past that." "Thank you." He nodded once, turned, made it 3 steps down the corridor before he stopped. "The person who left you." He didn't turn around. "Did he know what you are? What I am?" "A cartographer." "Did he know you could draw?" She blinked. "Yes." "Then he knew you could find your way without him." Pauses. "He left because he was afraid you'd figure that out." He walked away. She stood in the doorway holding a bowl of stew that was still warm and felt, for the first time in 2 years, like someone had said the thing she hadn't been able to say to herself. By the afternoon, she'd eaten, slept, and emerged onto the deck with her satchel and her ink pot. The coastline was sliding past on the port side, rocky cliffs giving way to sandy beach, then cliffs again. She found a spot near the bow where the railing was wide enough to brace her sketch pad against, and she began to draw. Coastlines, the shape of land meeting water, the depth markers, the hidden shoals and inlet mouths that could save a sailor's life or end it. Her hand moved without thinking. Ink on parchment. The world making sense the only way she knew how. She didn't hear Gareth approach. She felt it. That settling again. The deck beneath her feet going impossibly steady. The wind dropping. The constant low roar of the sea softening to a whisper. Like the world was holding its breath because he was near. "You're charting the passage," he said, leaning against the railing beside her. Close, but not touching. The compass pendant at his collar caught the light. Force of habit. She didn't look up from the parchment. "I chart everything I pass through. It's how I pay my way. These are better than what my navigator uses." She glanced at him. He was studying the map, not her, and there was something in his expression she hadn't expected. Respect. Plain and uncomplicated and real. "Your navigator uses royal charts," she said, because she'd noticed the crest on the ship's log when she'd passed the captain's quarters. A wolf. Bronze against a dark field. She'd seen that crest before. On trade coins, on border markers, on the seals of documents that moved through port towns like the one she'd just left. "These are the Alpha King's charts." He didn't deny it. "You're not a merchant captain," she said. "No. Gareth Strand. The Strand family holds the Northern Territories." Her hand had stopped moving. The ink was drying on her nib. "You're the Alpha King of the Northern Coast." "I am?" She put the pen down, looked at him fully for the first time since she'd boarded. Really looked. Past the open coat and the sea boots, and the roughness she'd mistaken for common labor. The way the crew moved around him. The way no one had questioned his order to bring a stranger aboard. The way he stood at the bow of his ship like the entire vessel was an extension of his body. "You could have told me on the dock." "Would you have gotten on?" She thought about it. "No. That's why I didn't tell you." He turned to face her, and the iron in his eyes had warmed. Not softened, not gentled, but warmed, like metal held near a flame. "You needed the choice to be about you, not about me." Something cracked in her chest. Not broke. Cracked open. Like a door she'd nailed shut 2 years ago when Malcolm first told her that her maps weren't good enough to sell, that she was wasting her time, that she should let him handle the money because she didn't understand how the world worked. "I don't need rescuing," she said. Her voice was steady. "Barely." "I know." He looked at the map she'd drawn. The coastline rendered in perfect, meticulous ink. You need a ship. That's different. That night, she couldn't sleep. The cabin was warm, the bunk was soft, and the anchor bond hummed at the edge of her awareness like a low note held on a string instrument. She could feel him somewhere above her on the deck. Not his location, exactly. His steadiness. The weight of him in the world. Like a fixed point on a map she hadn't finished drawing. She pulled on her boots and climbed to the upper deck. He was at the stern, alone, leaning on the rail with his coat pulled close against the night wind. The stars were thick overhead, a spill of light across the dark. The sea was calm. The ship barely moved. "Can't sleep either," she said, coming to stand beside him. "I don't sleep well on still water." He glanced at her. "The bond does that. Quiets the sea when we're near each other. You know what it is? I know what it feels like." He was quiet for a moment. The compass pendant caught starlight. Like the world stops rocking. Like everything I've spent my life bracing against just settles. She gripped the rail. "I thought it was the ship." "It's not the ship." They stood in silence. The kind that didn't need filling. The kind that existed between two people who'd both spent too long in loud rooms with the wrong company and had forgotten what real quiet sounded like. "Malcolm," she said. She hadn't planned to say his name. It came out like something dislodged. "He told me my maps were a hobby, that no one would pay for a woman's cartography. He managed the money because I—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "Because I let him." Gareth didn't speak. He waited. She could feel him waiting. Not impatiently, not like a man biding time until he could talk. Like a man who understood that some things needed to be said into open air before they could be released. "I drew the route for the entire southern corridor," she said. "Every inlet, every depth marker, every hidden reef from Ashport to the Widow's Teeth. He sold them under his name, kept the payment, told me we needed it for passage north." Voice breaks. There was never a we. There was just him, taking, and me, pretending I couldn't see it. Gareth's hands tightened on the rail. She could see the tendons flex in his forearms where his sleeves were pushed back. Could feel the bond between them vibrate like a struck chord. And the sea, the already still sea, went glass flat around them. Not a ripple, not a wave. The water reflecting the stars so perfectly, it looked like the ship was floating in the sky. "Where is he headed?" Gareth asked. His voice was low, controlled, the kind of control that had weight behind it. "South. Pensford, maybe. He has a cousin there who runs a trade house. Then he'll have to pass through my waters." Something in his tone made her look at him. His jaw was set. His iron eyes were dark. "Maps sold under a false name in the Northern Territories is fraud. My territory. My law. I don't want him punished. I want him gone. He will be. But the maps are yours, Amelia. Your hand. Your work. Your name. That doesn't get erased because a coward put his signature on it." It was the first time he'd said her name. She felt it in her sternum. A vibration. A warmth. A steadying that went deeper than the bond and further than the ship and settled in a part of her she'd been protecting so carefully that she'd forgotten it was there. She turned to face him. He was already facing her. "Why did you stop at that dock?" she asked. "You weren't scheduled to port there. Your crew was surprised." He held her gaze, the stars reflected in his iron eyes like navigation points on a chart she hadn't drawn yet. "I felt the anchor," he said, "from the open water. A pull I've never felt before, toward a harbor I had no reason to enter." He lifted one hand from the rail and held it between them, palm up, not reaching for her, offering. "I told my helmsman to turn. He asked why. I said because something was waiting for me." Her throat tightened. You didn't know it was a person. I knew it was you. Whispers. I just didn't know your name yet. He kissed her. Not suddenly. Not with the desperate urgency she'd expected from a man who radiated that much controlled power. He kissed her slowly, deliberately, one hand rising to cup the side of her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw, and when his mouth met hers, the bond between them opened like a held breath released. The ship, the sea, the sky all going so perfectly, impossibly still that she could hear his heartbeat. Or maybe it was hers. Maybe it didn't matter anymore, which was which. She leaned into him. Her hands found the front of his coat, gripped the rough wool, and the world beneath her feet was more solid than any ground she'd ever stood on. Not because of the ship, because of him. Because the thing she'd spent 2 years looking for in the wrong person, steadiness, safety, the simple feeling of being somewhere she was meant to be, was standing right here in a navy coat with salt in his hair and her name in his mouth. He pulled back just far enough to press his forehead against hers. His breath was uneven. His hand was trembling where it cradled her face. Stay on the ship past Thornwick, he said. I have maps to sell. Sell them from the ship. Sell them from my kingdom. Sell them from anywhere you want. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. Just don't get off. She closed her eyes, felt the anchor bond humming between them like a held note, felt the sea, steady and calm and impossibly flat, cradling the hull. I'll think about it, she said. He smiled. She felt it against her forehead. That's not a no. It's not a yes either. I'll take it. They stood at the stern until the stars began to fade and the eastern horizon turned the color of old brass. He didn't let go of her hand. She didn't pull it away. Greyport was loud. After 2 days of open water and the humming stillness of the anchor bond, the supply port hit Amelia like a wall. Gareth had gone ashore to meet with the harbor master, and Amelia had taken her satchel into the market to see if anyone needed a coastal chart. She was at a cartographer's stall negotiating a fair price for her work. Hers were better than the printed maps on display, and the shopkeeper knew it, when she heard the voice. There you are. Her blood went cold. Malcolm Cray stood at the edge of the market square with his hands in his pockets, and that smile on his face. The one that looked easy and warm from a distance but up close was all calculation. His faded tan jerkin was wrinkled. His cream shirt was stained at the cuffs. He looked exactly like what he was. A man who wore borrowed clothes and spent other people's money and never understood why it ran out. The ship put in at Greyport instead of Pensford, he said, walking toward her. Lucky, isn't it? I was worried I'd have to backtrack to find you. Find me? She couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. You left me on a dock with nothing. I left to secure our position. I was coming back for you, Amelia. I always come back. You took my money. Our money. He corrected her gently, like he was explaining something to a child who didn't understand yet. That tone, that patient, condescending tone that she'd swallowed 1,000 times because fighting it felt like more work than agreeing. And I used it to book passage south because there's real work in Pensford, real connections. I was going to send for you once I was settled. Send for me. She repeated the words, tasted them. They tasted like the last 2 years, flat and stale and wrong. Like luggage. Like my partner. He reached for her arm. She stepped back. Don't. Amelia. I said don't. Her voice was louder than she'd meant. The cartographer behind the stall looked up. 2 women carrying baskets paused. A dockworker glanced over his shoulder. Good. Let them look. Let someone see this for what it was. You didn't take our money, Malcolm. You took my money. Coins I earned drawing maps you told me no one would buy, that you then sold under your name. You didn't go to secure a position. You went because you thought I'd be stuck. Because you thought I'd have nowhere to go, and no way to follow, and I'd be sitting on that dock when you decided you needed me again." His smile flickered, the warmth fading, the calculation showing through. "You're being dramatic." "I'm being honest. For the first time in 2 years, I'm being honest." She pulled her satchel strap tighter across her shoulder. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was not. "I'm not coming with you. I'm not waiting for you. I'm not yours to send for or come back to or leave behind whenever it suits you. We're done. You don't have anywhere to go. I have everywhere to go." She held up the map she'd drawn on the ship. The coastline from the harbor to Greyport, rendered in perfect ink, better than anything in the stall behind her. "I've always had everywhere to go. You just kept telling me I didn't." Malcolm stared at her. His washed-out eyes narrowed. He opened his mouth to speak, and stopped, because Gareth Strand was standing behind her. "The lady said you're done," Gareth said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The 2 crew members flanking him were enough context. The bronze compass pendant and the wolf crest on his coat were enough context. The iron in his eyes was more than enough. Malcolm looked at Gareth, looked at the crew, looked at Amelia, standing between them with her chin up and her maps in her hand and her shaking hands and her steady voice. "You found someone new already." He tried to make it sound mocking. It came out thin. "I found myself," Amelia said. "You just happened to lose me first." Malcolm left, backing away through the market crowd with that flickering smile finally gone, replaced by the tight expression of a man who'd just realized everyone could see him clearly. Gareth watched him go. Then he turned to Amelia, and the iron in his eyes had warmed. "You didn't need me for that," he said. "No." She looked at him, at the compass pendant and the open coat, and the steady, unshakable presence of him in the middle of a loud, chaotic port where everything was moving except the ground beneath her feet. "But I'm glad you were here." He held out his hand. She took it. The anchor bond settled between them like a deep breath, and the market went on around them. And for the first time in her life, Amelia held someone's hand, not because she needed to hold on, but because she wanted to. The ship left Greyport with the evening tide. They stood at the bow together and watched the port shrink behind them and the open water stretch ahead, dark and silver and endless. The stars came out one by one. The sea was calm. "Thornwick is tomorrow," Gareth said. "I know." "Are you getting off?" She looked at the charts she'd spread across the captain's desk that afternoon, the ones his navigator used, the ones stamped with the royal crest. She'd already found 3 errors. She'd already begun correcting them. She'd already started drawing the stretch of coast between Greyport and Thornwick in finer detail than anyone in his kingdom had ever mapped it. "No," she said. He looked at her. She felt the weight of that look, the relief he wouldn't say aloud, the want he held in check. The steady, patient attention of a man who had turned his ship toward a harbor he had no reason to enter because something in the water told him to. "Then stay," he said, "not as a passenger, as my cartographer, as my—" He stopped. His jaw worked. The compass pendant glinted at his throat. "As whatever you want to be, for as long as you want to be it." "Your cartographer," she said. "That's the official title, yes." "And the unofficial one?" He stepped closer. The bond opened between them like the sea parting for the bow of a ship, and the deck went still, and the wind dropped, and the stars reflected so clearly in the water that it looked like they were sailing through the sky. "Mine," he said, whispers, "if you'll have me." She leaned up, pressed her mouth to the corner of his jaw, where the roughness met the warmth, and felt him shudder. Felt the bond anchor them both to the same fixed point. Not a place, not a harbor, but each other. "I'll have you," she said, "but I keep my own cabin." He laughed, low and rough and real, and it was the best sound she'd ever heard on open water. "You keep your own cabin, and my own maps." and your own maps. And if you ever touch my coin purse. He kissed her temple. I will personally throw myself into the sea. Good. She leaned against him. His arm came around her shoulders, heavy and warm and steady. The ship sailed north. The stars burned overhead. The sea was still. 3 months later, the maps were spreading. Amelia stood in the chart room of Gareth's coastal keep. Her chart room now, though the brass nameplate on the door still made her chest tight every time she read it. A. Kessler, Royal Cartographer, and pinned the final section of the northern coast map to the wall, 12 feet wide when fully assembled. Every inlet, every depth marker, every hidden reef and tidal pattern from the southern harbors to the ice flows of the far north, rendered in her hand, under her name. The guild at Thornwick had bought 3 copies before the ink was dry. 2 more commissions had come from merchant captains who'd seen the charts aboard Gareth's ship. The harbormaster at Greyport had replaced every map in his office with hers, and sent a letter asking if she'd consider charting the eastern passages next. She would. After lunch. After she'd finished this last section and hung it properly and stood back to see it all at once. The whole coastline, the whole picture, the whole world she'd mapped with her own 2 hands while the man she loved steered the ship in the sea stayed calm beneath her feet. The door opened behind her. You missed lunch, Gareth said. He was leaning in the doorway with his arms crossed, and his iron eyes warm, and his compass pendant catching the light from the window, and he was looking at her the way he always did when he found her here. Like the chart room was his favorite room in the keep. Like the woman standing in it was his favorite thing in the world. I'm almost done. You said that 2 hours ago. I meant it 2 hours ago. The tidal patterns in the straits were wrong. I had to redraw the whole eastern edge. He crossed the room, stood behind her. His hand settled on her waist, warm, deliberate, steady, and he rested his chin on the top of her head and looked at the map she'd made. It's extraordinary, he said. It's accurate. That's all a map needs to be. It's extraordinary, he repeated, and he wasn't talking about the map anymore. She leaned back into him, felt the anchor bond hum between them, quieter now than it had been at sea, but still there, always there. The world steady when he was near, the noise and chaos of everything else softening to a whisper when his hands were on her waist and his heartbeat was at her back. I got a letter today, she said. From whom? The Cartographers' Guild in Pensford. She paused. Let the silence hold. Malcolm tried to sell my old maps there under his name. They recognized my hand. The guildmaster in Thornwick had sent them samples. They rejected his claim and banned him from the guild hall. Gareth's arms tightened around her. Good. He sent me a letter, too, asking if I'd vouch for him. Said he was struggling. Said he missed me. She reached up and placed her hand over Gareth's where it rested on her waist. I used the back of it to test a new ink formula. It bled everywhere. Ruined the whole page. He laughed. That low, rough, real laugh that she'd first heard on the deck of his ship under the stars. The laugh that still made the anchor bond sing. I love you, he said. He said it simply. The way he said everything that mattered. Plainly, directly. Like the truth was the only language he spoke. She turned in his arms, looked up at him. The iron-dark eyes that had been the first thing to steady her world. The jaw that tensed when he was angry on her behalf. The compass pendant she'd started calling his tell because he always reached for it when he was thinking about her. I love you, she said, and I'm keeping the chart room. It was always yours. She kissed him, slowly, deliberately, the way he'd kissed her that first night at the stern of his ship, when the sea went still and the stars came down and she'd decided, not in that moment, but in all the moments since, that the best map she'd ever draw was the one that led her here. The chart room was warm. The keep was quiet. Outside the window, the harbor stretched wide and silver under the afternoon sun, and somewhere beyond the breakwater, the open sea was waiting. She'd charted all. Every coastline, every hidden passage, every distance between where she'd been and where she was going. And the world beneath her feet would stay steady. Not because of the ground or the ship or the stone floor of a chart room in a coastal keep. Because of him. Because of her. Because of the anchor they'd become for each other. The map on the wall was 12 feet wide, and it was hers, and it was extraordinary, and she was never, ever looking back.